So we're going to talk about something called the Agile mindset. My name is Linda Rising, and the most important slide is in front of you now. If I say something that you don't get to ask me about, either during the talk or after, you have my email address. I love to talk about Agile software development. I love to talk about retrospectives, the change process, but my main focus nowadays is how your brain works. And that's what we're going to talk about. Agile probably means to you something to do with software, but the topic of this talk is much broader than software. So my name is Linda Rising. Did you go online and read my bio? Anybody? Nobody. Well, you should. It starts out by saying Linda Rising lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and she has a PhD in computer science. And if you had read that, and then you would walk in and see this talk, and you would look up on the stage and you would say, "Good Lord, that woman must be at least 95. How could she possibly have a PhD in computer science? When she was in school, they were probably sitting in a circle around a bunch of rocks, hammering out messages to each other." Is that what you thought? And you would be right. There was no computer science when I went to school. The first time I started out as a chemist, I actually went back to school much, much later in life. And my goal at that time was to get that PhD in computer science. And my specific goal was to finish by 50. And I just made it. I finished 1 month before my 50th birthday. And that was 22 years ago. So here's the first takeaway for you that has to do with agility, that has to do with how your brain works. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you're too old or too young or too Philadelphian. Is that a word? Philadelphian? To do whatever it is that you're determined to do if you're willing to invest the energy that it takes. Don't let how dare anyone else stand in the way of your goals. Now, probably most of you have been having thoughts, "Oh my, I just turned 30. Life is over. How will I ever be able to keep up at my advanced age?" So will you let me be your role model? I'm not that exceptional, really. I didn't go to MIT or Harvard. I just went to ordinary state schools. Probably not any more intelligent. Oh, wait a minute, that's what we're going to talk about. Than you are. So if you let me be your role model, especially for the women, all three women in the room, then you can say, "Well, hey, Linda did it. She went back to school and finished by 50, so surely at 30 or 35 or 40 or whatever that milestone is that you're struggling with right now, surely you can do it." So we're going to talk about the Agile mindset. It has something to do with research. Oh, wait a minute. Let's talk about agility. How many are doing some kind of Agile development, Scrum, or any one of those other flavors? Oh, okay, lots of people in the room are doing that. How did you reach that decision? How did you decide, all right, this would be a good thing to do to go Agile? Did you look at all of the scientific studies? All of the research that shows clearly Agile is so much better than whatever it is that you were doing. Did you look at all of those randomized, controlled, balanced studies that show clearly that Agile is better. Did you look at those? Not a single hand is going up in the room. And that's good because you're being honest. You couldn't have looked at those studies because there aren't any. So how did you decide to go Agile? What was it? Anybody? How'd you decide? Yes? A friend. What more reputable source of information for making a major decision about the direction of your team than to talk to friends? Well, I think that's very good. How did you decide?
I encountered it seemed early enough defined to allow for substitution of common sense.
Common sense. That's very appealing as well. You know, I often wonder if the drug companies decided on products the way we make our decisions. It would be something like this. Hey, I've got these blue pills. They really helped me. I feel so much better. You want to try it?
Full of advertising.
I have a talk. I'm not giving it now, but it's called, Is Agile a Placebo? What's a placebo? Oh, no. Oh, no. So when the drug companies do their randomized, balanced, controlled experiments, they used to just say, well, here's a group, they get nothing, and here's another group over here, and they get the drug, and we will compare the results. And then they realized, you know, sometimes we could be giving people a drug and really they get better, even though it turns out later this drug has no efficacy at all. What was going on there? We need another group that gets something that looks like the real drug, and now the comparison is, yes, we look at the group that got nothing, but we also do a comparison between those that got the real drug and this middle group that got something that looks like the real drug but isn't, because many of those people get better as well. And why is that? Why do the people who get a look-alike, why do they get better? Yeah, they believed in it. We've got little pharmacies in our head. If only we had some way of turning that on, maybe we wouldn't need many of the real drugs with real side effects. Actually, it turns out placebos do have side effects. That belief is powerful. So can you see why it seemed to me that Agile might be a placebo? That it works because we believe in it? So one of our recourses is to at least look at some other areas where they do balanced controlled experiments and to try to learn from them something that will help us. Now, I'm very happy to say I went to the rally talk. Is the rally guy in the room? He's got metrics. He's got 10,000 teams, and he's starting to look at some statistical analysis of how those Agile practices impact measures of productivity, defects, all those illities that we care about. At least that's one small step on the road to being a little more scientific about our decisions. Well, here's the question in this research. I'm not going to ask you, this is not a survey, but just look at these two ways of looking at the world. The first one says intelligence is something that, well, you're born with it, and there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. You have a certain amount of it. We can measure it in an IQ test, and that's it. Okay, you can learn a few new things, but that amount of intelligence that you have is fixed. Okay, think about that. Here's another way of looking at it. Yeah, of course, you're born with some capabilities. We could call one of them intelligence, but no matter what it is, you can always improve. You can always get better. And in some cases, you can get a lot better. Now, I used intelligence in those statements, but this could be anything. Any kind of ability or talent. And most of the time, we move around between these two mindsets, but we have a dominating one that kind of rules the way we see the world. So I'm going to call the people that have primarily that first one, I'm going to say those people have a fixed mindset. You've got talent or ability, and that's it. You have it or you don't have it. Whereas those people who have a notion of improving or growing that, if you just work at it, if you just improve, well, right now I'm going to call those people the effort people, fixed or effort, one of those two for just about any ability or intelligence. Now, the research around these mindsets goes back over 20 years, so this is not recent. It's not brand new. And it's been repeated many, many times. One of the good things about a lot of the scientific areas is not only do they do randomized, balanced, controlled experiments, but they do them over and over. They repeat them, so they make sure that those results are verifiable. So I'm just going to use one flavor of the experiments that were done on mindsets, and I'm going to talk about students. The experiments have been done with children, have been done with high school students, college students, sports teams, people in business communities. So I'm just going to say students as a generic term. So in this experiment, there are really a series of experiments. Phase 1, the group of people in the experiment, in this case the students, were given a real easy test. Something where the researchers knew they'd all do really well. And after they finished taking this really easy test, the results were given back to the subjects, the students, and in a process that I will come back to later, I will say they were categorized somehow into the two groups. The one that believes in effort, yes, you are born with a certain amount of intelligence or ability, but if you work hard, you can improve that. Or into a fixed mindset, the belief that whatever you have has already been determined at birth and there is nothing you can do about it. And this was a randomized controlled experiment, so they tried to have two balanced groups. Okay, so we've given everybody a test, everybody got the results. We now divide those subjects up into two groups, effort and fixed. Phase 2. We're going to ask everybody, what would you like to do now? Would you like to take a really, really hard test, but it's a chance for you to learn. You know, when you do something challenging, you have a chance to learn. Or you can take another really easy test. Now, all we've done up to this point is give our subjects a real easy test where they all did well, and then somehow they were put into two categories, effort or fixed. You wouldn't think that at this point there'd really be much difference. We started out with a group of pretty homogeneous, in this case, students, not much difference among those individuals. So this is a question that looks like, well, it could be 50-50. Who knows how they're going to respond? And the first time this experiment was done, the researchers were astounded to see that it did already make a huge difference, whether they were in the fixed group or the effort group. Looking at the response to this question, what do you want to do now? You want to have a really difficult test, or do you want another easy test? What do you think? What were the answers? What would you guess? Effort people said, yeah, give me the difficult test. Why?
They wanted to see if they could do it.
And they liked the challenge, and not only that, the researcher threw this in. You would have a chance to learn by taking this difficult test, and that's a group of people that believes that if you throw difficulty at me, that's a chance to learn. Whereas those in the fixed group, they believe you've got a fixed amount of intelligence or any other ability. That's it. So why would they choose the easy test? Because they would do well, right? And that would say, you did really well, so you must be very intelligent, you must be very smart. And that turns out to be a characteristic of the two groups. The group that believes in effort likes challenge, likes difficulty, embraces the chance to maybe fail, but to have the opportunity to learn. Whereas the group that holds the fixed mindset said, whoa, no, wait a minute. I want to always look good. Because that's also a way of showing everybody, including myself, that I have it, that I have that talent or that ability, that intelligence. And sure enough, that's what happened. Almost all of the effort group chose, let me have that difficult test, where almost all of those who were in the fixed mindset group said, no, I'd rather have that easy test. Already significant difference in behavior. Phase 3, well, too bad. If you ever sign up for a psychology experiment, they're not going to pay any attention to what you want. They're going to do what they want to do anyway, which was, in this case, give everybody a difficult test. And they said, while you're taking this difficult test, we want you to talk to yourself. Talk out loud so we can hear how you're thinking. And they noticed that those students who were in the effort group talked to themselves as they were taking this difficult test, and they would say things like, wow, this is really hard. Oh, I better slow down. I better read that question again. I'm not sure I really understood it, but I know if I really concentrate, if I really focus on this, I can do pretty well. They were coaching themselves. They were encouraging themselves. They're saying, concentrate, focus, pay attention. Those in the fixed group, when they ran up against a difficult question, would say, oh man, look at this question. I have no idea. I don't know what to do with it. I should never have signed up for this experiment anyway. I'm really stupid. You know, we all believe that we have a little voice in our heads. It kind of sits behind our eyes, talks to us, especially at times that are stressful. And that little voice defines us. Have you ever had a little voice that said, you can't do this? You must be stupid. You'll never figure it out. You might as well go home. Your mother was right. Or your grandmother, or your first grade teacher, or whoever it was that primed that little voice to tell you what you could do or what you couldn't do, which is where most of those little voices come from. some little voice that's an echo of another voice that influenced us in one of these two directions, and we still listen to it. Phase 4. Now they can choose. They just had this really difficult test. You can either look at the exams of those students who did better than you, or you can look at those who didn't do as well. So what do you think? Would there be a difference between those in the effort group and those in the fixed group? What do you think? Well, who picked what?
Effort went for one and fixed went for two.
So why would they do that?
Effort, they want to see how they can improve what they didn't get.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fixed, based on what you're saying, it's kind of like one of, again, reassert their superiority.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. So those who were in the effort group said, hey, let me see all of those who did better because I might learn something. I might pick up some information that would help me down the road. I'd see things that I missed. Where those who were in the fixed mindset, well, they didn't really care about learning. They cared about making themselves feel better. They know they didn't do as well as they hoped. But by looking at all of those who didn't do as well, that would say, ha, I'm smarter than they are. So most of the effort students chose 1. The fixed students chose 2, exactly as we predicted. Phase 5. Now we're going to go back and do pretty much what we did at the beginning. We're going to give them another easy test. It was very much like the very first test they took. And what they were surprised to see is that the effort students did better on the very similar test. The effort students did better. The fixed students, worse. Not by a lot. So by going through the experience of having this difficult test, the challenge, and running up against the possibility that maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was, they actually had a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I guess I'm not so smart, and they became less smart. There's a lot about that little voice in our heads that if we listen to it long enough, we begin to believe it. It can actually determine what we can do and what we can't do. Phase 6. They said, you know, we're going to test other students who are going to go through this same exercise, and we'd like your help. Is there something that you'd like to pass along to the students in the future? Would you like to tell them some things that you learned that would help them? And what they found was the effort students were encouraging, and they said to the students in the future, oh, you're going to take a difficult test, but don't be discouraged. If you take your time, don't panic. Read the question over again. They gave them little hints. They were actually coaching those students just as they had coached themselves. Well, the other students said, well, you know, you're going to take a difficult test, but, you know, you either have it or you don't. And I hate to tell you that some of you are not going to do very well. That's just the way it is. And when given the chance to share their scores on the difficult test, they found a little extra tidbit of information, which is that 40% of those in the fixed group lied about their scores. They inflated them so they would look better. I hadn't expected that. That was a little bit of a surprise. So this work comes from a researcher named Carol Dweck. She's written a book about mindset, and in it, it's not written for the researcher, but it is all research-based. So there's a lot of information about all of the studies that have been done on these two mindsets and what she's learned over 20 years of research. But I know you don't have time to read any more books. You've got too many to read as it is. So these are references that are online that are free. Time Magazine did a special on Carol Dweck. If you have children, you might want to look at the Take on Mindset for Parents that's called How Not to Talk to Your Kids, that was published in New York Magazine. And then Malcolm Gladwell did an article in his series in the New Yorker about mindset. And it's my understanding that these slides are going to be available to you. You don't have to worry about scratching all this down. And in any case, you got my email address. I'll be happy to send it to you, and some of the papers that have been written if you'd really like to read more about it. So let's look a little bit at these two mindsets, because maybe you can see, for me, the growth mindset or the effort mindset or the determination mindset cried out to be called Agile. There was a matching. I was a mathematician before I became a computer scientist, and it seems like there's a topological mapping between the holding of the growth or the effort mindset and Agile anything. So I'm going to call it Agile. That these two mindsets are so different in how they view everything that we encounter. So we know that, first of all, it's about ability, that those people that hold the fixed mindset think, well, you're born with it or not. It's like height. You're tall or you're short. You're smart or you're not. You're a natural golfer or tennis player or artist or a musician. You have it. You're a natural at it, or you're not. And those who have the Agile mindset say, well, yeah, okay, I know that not everybody can be Beethoven or Einstein, but we can all get better. We can all improve if we're determined, if we work hard at it, which is exactly what I did when I went back to school at 47 to finish that PhD, where I was not only older than all my fellow graduate students, I was older than all my professors. And when I finally started on my research, I learned I was older than my advisor's mother. He had a very young mother. So what about goals? For those who have the fixed mindset, the goal is, I want to look good. Because if I look good, that's an indication, since we can't open up our skulls and peer at our abilities, that's an indication that I have it, that I am intelligent. So looking good becomes the goal. Whereas for the Agilist, the goal is, I want to get better. I want to learn. Challenges, no thank you. For the fixed mindset, a challenge means that I might not look good. I might fail. That would clearly signal to everybody that I don't have it. Or a challenge, well, that's how I learn. That's what the Agilist says. Challenges are the road to improvement. Failure defines your identity for someone with a fixed mindset. I must be a failure. Whereas failure for someone with the Agile mindset, well, I know I didn't do well here. I know I'm not very good at this yet, but if I want to, I can improve. I can get better by working at it. Effort, well, that just must mean that you don't have the talent or ability if you have to practice it or if you have to work hard at it. Whereas effort, for the Agile mindset, well, that's how you achieve your goals. That's how you achieve mastery. And then finally, if I run up against difficulties, and that's always going to happen, I give up. If I have the fixed mindset, I label myself as a failure, and I give up. Whereas if I'm Agile, and the challenge is overwhelming, I bounce back. I went through Betsy Ross's house a couple of days ago. We got here early to do some sightseeing. Now that's an agile mindset. If you want to look back in history, she lost 3 husbands. Every time she bounced back. She was a Quaker who was castigated by her community because she married men who were not Quakers, but she bounced back. A good example of resilience, survival in the face of difficulty. So there's some pretty clear and pretty severe differences between these two mindsets. And it applies also to how we look at others. So if I believe that I'm born with it or not, I have that talent or ability or not, that's also what I think about you. And what we know about us is that we spend our time 24/7, if we could, labeling other people. You're tall, I'm short. You're black, I'm white. You're from Australia, I'm from the US. You live in Philadelphia, I live in Nashville. We can't help it. We categorize without thinking and label others. And if in our labeling we believe that once we've determined on that category or that ability and that it's fixed, then I've already decided whether you're smart or not. And I hang on to that. I hang on to that judgment. Well, those with an agile mindset do the same thing, but the research shows they don't hang on to those stereotypes as strongly. They're more willing, more forgiving to learn about others and to allow them to grow and improve. So for me, this really struck home when I looked at the research, because Carol Dweck has done a lot of research on what happens to little girls when they grow up and they move from grade school to junior high. So you can imagine I'm a woman who's always been in technical fields, and I am on so many panels and so many workshops, and I get to write so many articles and give so many talks on women in IT, and why aren't there more of them? And the answer I always give is, I have no idea. I don't know whether it means that if you had brothers or you didn't. Did you play with Barbie dolls or you didn't play with Barbie dolls? Or did you ride a bicycle? Or did you drive early? Or did you grow up in a city? Everybody's looking at everything when it comes to why aren't women either going into IT, or once they get there, they don't stay. But the numbers, at least in the US, are pretty clear. They don't. They go somewhere else. They do other things. And we're losing that massive contribution of a big segment of our population. And it starts here. So what about bright little girls? Probably all the women in the room were at some point one of those bright little girls. We know that little girls, when they're born, they have better communication skills, better empathy than little boys. And so they are usually obedient. They do what they're told. Teachers love them. In fact, the teachers and the parents and the grandparents are always telling bright little girls, "Oh, you are so smart. You're so pretty. You're perfect. Oh, look at this drawing. Isn't it beautiful? You're so talented. Oh, let me hear you play that piano piece again. You have musical ability." So all we do from the beginning is attribute bright little girls to being smart, talented. You can do anything you want. That's what we tell them. It's an attempt to build up self-esteem. Well, the research is pretty clear about bright little girls. It all says, if you look at a cohort, that means a group of people that have similar characteristics. If you look at a cohort, bright little girls are the most fixed on the planet. They always want to look good. When given that choice, do you want to take the hard test or the easy test? They never pick the hard test. In fact, lots of quotes from little girls who have been in those experiments say, oh, well, I always want to be perfect. I want 100%. And they can do it in the beginning. They can do it in grade school. And then the numbers begin to show that when they transition to junior high, and all of a sudden things begin to get a little more challenging. And you know what happens to the people with fixed mindset when they run into challenge? They go the other way. They begin to say, hey, I can't do this. I can't. I must not be very good at that. Well, what about bright little boys? That looks like an Agile project to me. See, they missed a space over here. Obviously not perfect. Yeah, they were just having a good time. Bright little boys, even the brightest, are always, well, experimenting, always getting into trouble. Parents and teachers tell them, why can't you sit still? Why can't you pay attention? Look at this paper. Why is it messy? You'll have to do it over again. Why can't you be more like your sister? So bright little boys from the very beginning are constantly told, hey, you need to straighten out your act. Hey, you're not doing this right. You need to do it better. And of all the cohorts on the planet, bright little boys are the most agile. So when they make the transition to junior high and all of a sudden things get harder, well, so what? Everything has been harder for them from the beginning. So they embrace it. Bright little girls, bright little boys. Companies can have a mindset. I think this is Ken Lay's mugshot before he was hauled off to prison. I assume you know what happened to Enron? Okay, they have an interesting policy. It's called hire the best, as though they could determine that. They were looking for people who had it. And once they got them, then the whole company was about trying to make sure that they had the best of the best. So the process that went on inside that company was called rank and yank, a continual comparison to say, who's better? Who's better than whom? So that we then get rid of the lower third. And what that leads to is extremely fixed mindset on the part of the people, and not any attempt to get better, but an attempt to look good. And one of the ways you can look good inside a company that has the fixed mindset is to make others look bad, even sabotage other projects. All of those fixed mindset practices ultimately led to the downfall of Enron. So my example of the other extreme, most companies I think are kind of in the middle, is Southwest Airlines. I do a lot of flying to Europe, and every time I say, oh, I wish Southwest would go to London. If you look at Southwest Airlines, as has been done in many business schools, so many case studies of Southwest Airlines, what you see are little bits and pieces of information about hiring, about attitude toward employees that just scream Agile. When they hire, it's not about the best or the top 10% of the graduating class of Harvard Business School. It's about people who have something called the Southwest attitude. And the description of that attitude is about learning. It's about growing. It's about being open. It's about being willing to try an experiment, something you've never done before. I don't think they let just anybody pilot the plane, but they're pretty open to doing all kinds of interesting things. That's a company with an agile mindset. Treating people as though they don't have some kind of fixed ability that can be measured and ranked, but who have an ability to grow and improve and learn. We know that managers have mindsets. Now, look how old this paper is. Goodness, it's 1988. So I have a copy of this. I won't ask you to raise your hand if you're a manager, but if you are a manager and you haven't read that paper, you should. So send me an email and I'll email you the paper. It says basically that your attitude toward your employee determines how well they perform. In fact, the first time I read through some of this research, I was surprised to see that most managers make up their minds pretty quickly. Long before they've had a chance to see the actual performance of any employee, they've already decided who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. So I've never been a manager. I have lots of friends who are managers. Some of my best friends are managers. So I asked them, Dave, hey, Dave, is this true? You know what they're saying here is that managers immediately make up their minds. When they meet someone who's an employee, they don't even know yet whether this person is going to be a good performer or not, but they've already decided. Really, is that true, Dave? Well, Linda, I mean, yeah, I guess we do, but you know what? We're always right. Well, of course they are. Because if I believe that you're a good guy, I treat you differently, don't I? And no matter what you do, I see that behavior differently than if I believe you're somebody who doesn't have it. And my expectation drives your performance. I can actually create a high flyer or a poor performer with my expectation. That's what the paper says. And since then, I've read lots of research that shows that's not just managers. That's all of us. If we have someone on our team and we believe that person is stellar and we treat them and expect stellar performance, what's we'll get? It's up to us, isn't it? It's up to us to grow each other. Not just managers. It's up to us to grow ourselves. What are you telling yourself? And what are you telling others about your belief in their abilities? What are we losing? Teams inside organizations can also have a mindset. I do a lot of retrospectives for companies, and I go in and you can tell. Any difficulty at all can bring a team with the fixed mindset to its knees. Things aren't perfect, so therefore there must be something wrong with us. They have no way of resolving that. They have no way of learning from that, and it brings progress to a standstill. Or the belief that there are difficulties, okay, we can overcome them. I don't always agree with my teammates, but we have a way of working together, of collaborating. We're agile. I don't know whether I should talk about this or not, but you can see this in marriages. I have a good friend who had a big birthday coming up just recently, and And she said, well, you know, this is an important birthday. I hope my husband buys me this really special present that I want. And I said, well, did you tell him? And she said, well, no, of course not. If he really loves me, he'll know. He'll know what I want. I don't have to tell, I don't have to communicate. Sounds pretty fixed to me. If it's really meant to be, if he is my Prince Charming, we should always get along. We should never have any disagreements. And if we do, that must mean that we don't have it. So it applies really to all relationships. And we know people are always going to run into trouble, aren't they? No perfect people that I've seen. It's a long quote from a guy at Arizona State, which is where I got my PhD. He's a very famous physicist, and he said, you know, one of the problems is we grow students with this. And he didn't say fixed mindset, but that's what he meant. We always give them problems they can solve. And that's not what's out in the world at all. So when they run up a problem that can't be solved, they get discouraged, and they think that they can't solve any problems. That's not what we should be doing in education. So our educational system is a little bit balanced toward the fixed mindset. It's a little bit in the direction of, well, let's see if we can measure how much ability you have, and therefore we'll give you a grade that matches that ability, and then we will have categorized you nicely so you'll know where you fit in the grand scheme of things. And we do that with the kinds of work we assign, the kinds of assignments we expect you to complete. When this is really how it all started, I don't think anybody here probably began to walk immediately. I mean, I always run into an audience where somebody said, yes, I did. I immediately started. We fell down. We took a few steps and we fell down. And we got up and we fell down again. That's the heart of agility right there. That's what babies do. They make mistakes. They try something. It doesn't work. Let's try something else. And that's us. That was all of us at one time. So the good news from the researchers is that we are hardwired to hold one or the other of those two attitudes, but it's tenuous. We can move around. Those attitudes are not fixed. We can help each other have one mindset or another. The research shows that very small manipulations can move your mindset. So let's go back to that set of experiments with the students. Do you remember that? In the beginning, they had an easy test, and then they said, oh, you did really well. And now, how were those two groups? Remember, such a difference between the group that was the fixed and the effort. Really big differences almost immediately. I didn't say how those two groups were created. So let me finish the story of that experiment. So at the end of phase 1, they gave everybody back their test. And they had already decided, they divided the group up into two balanced effort and fixed groups. To those who had been picked to be in the effort group, they gave back the test and they said, hey, here's your test. You did really well. You must have worked hard. That's it. To the fixed group, they said, hey, here's your test. You did really well. You must be smart. Small manipulation created those enormous results. So think about someone who has all their lives been told, oh, you're so smart. Oh, you're so talented. Oh, you're so perfect. No wonder they wind up bright little girls with the fixed mindset. I hope you're a parent who has a bright little girl, and I hope you're not saying, oh, you're perfect, you're so smart, you're so talented. I want you to tell that bright little girl, hey, you really worked hard. I can see you put a lot of work into this painting. I can see you've really practiced a lot on that piano or that violin or that flute. I can see you really worked hard to do whatever. That's what I want you to tell not only the bright little boys, but also the bright little girls. Praise effort. Let that be the experimental manipulation that will produce an agile mindset in your bright little girl. From the First Lady who said, nobody is born smart. Nobody is born knowing how to read. No one is born knowing how to do math. No one is born knowing how to play the flute. All that comes with a lot of hard work. Even the president has to work hard. So we've talked about bright little girls and bright little boys. What we didn't talk about are all the little girls and the little boys who were told from the very beginning, you're stupid. You can't do it. You'll never amount to anything. I wish you'd never been born. And that produces a different kind of fixed mindset. A mindset that believes, I'll never be able to do anything. I will never be able to achieve anything. I'll never be anything. So Carol Dweck's research is now all about taking all of those children from some of the interesting schools that we have in Boston and New York City. I don't know about Philadelphia, but to try to teach them about the agile mindset so it can be taught. And the telling statement from one of the students in her classes who finally came up after the end of several weeks, who said, you mean I don't have to be stupid? You mean I don't have to be a failure? I don't have to be worthless? So praise effort. Strategies. How did you think of using those colors in that painting? Praise what was done. Don't praise talent. Don't praise ability. Do that for your children. Do that for the people you work with. Do that for yourself. And what we know that even those small manipulations can create agility, can create an agile mindset. I like this. Just say, what mindset do you want to hold? Do you want to be agile or fixed? The process of examining the answer to that question is enough to shift mindsets. So I know you can't read this. This is a talk I gave for the first time as the closing keynote of the Agile conference a couple of years ago. And I was so surprised because all the email was, Linda, you didn't tell me enough things to say. I want some more examples of things to say. So here it is, and I know that you will have a copy of the slides, but if you can't find them online, which often happens, here's another promise, a gift from me to you. If you'd like to have the PowerPoint slides for this presentation so that you can show them to your colleagues who didn't get to come to the conference or who in another talk, if you want to show them at home to your family or to your school or to your children, take them. And then you can read the details. Here are some more things to say to your kids, to each other. A very common question I get is, my spouse obviously has the fixed mindset. I try to tell him or her, you can do it. You are smart. And that is exactly the wrong thing to say, because that enforces the fixed mindset. What you want to say instead is, in the past, I can think of a time when you really worked hard and you overcame this challenge. Call up the process, call up the strategy, call up the work, call up the determination. Don't label. Don't ever counter that spouse or that partner's, I can't do it, I'm so stupid, by saying, no, no, you're smart. That stays in the fixed mindset, and you want to move to agility. So here are things you can say to your colleagues. Here are some things you can say to yourself. And of course, all of this, to me, fits exactly with what we might call the heart of Agile software development, which is about learning, which is about growing, which is about improving, which all sits on failure. Failure is okay. So I combed all of the Agile resources I could find, and I pulled up fail early, fail often, fail fast, learn constantly. Failure is an option. That's how we learn. Without failure, how can learning happen? Make mistakes faster. So if you don't know about Menlo Innovations, it's the most agile company on the planet. Go to menloinnovations.com and look at all the information they share with the world about how they do everything. Perfect is a verb. Kent Beck said that. Those that fail fastest grow strongest. Agility is about the agile mindset. So we've got agile in two senses in a way. Agile to do with agile software, agile to do with the agile mindset, and to me, they are talking about the same thing. So I said earlier that if you let me be your role model, it'll give you something to hang on to, but it's stronger than that. The research shows that if you believe that aging is a bad thing, you will age faster and you'll die sooner. It's an interesting study done on 70-year-olds after they had been tracked for over 40 years. Two groups. One group believed that old people should be ground up into Soylent Green about the time they are 45. Sorry, that's you. Other group believed, no, old people are cool. They have wisdom. They have a wonderful plethora of experiences to share. And in tracking these two groups of people, they saw that the people that had age stereotyping began to have age-related illnesses sooner, and they died earlier. So if you can shift that mindset, not only toward agility, but toward believing that aging is wonderful. So this is what 72 looks like. 72 travels around the world. 72 keeps learning. 72 gets to hang out with really cool people like you. Then when you're 72, you will be amazing. You're already pretty good. Thank you. Send me some email and I'll send you the presentation. You can read all the details. Thanks.